Thank you, Ruth, and morning, everybody. It's really such a pleasure to be here in a room of change makers. I couldn't agree more, Jenny. I'm a physiotherapist by profession, but have had the absolute privilege to do many other roles, actually, always within the acute setting, but I've been director of operations in a large acute hospital, so absolutely recognise the scenario that Jenny describes there about that knock-on effect of our work, and particularly that of community rehabilitation, the importance of getting that right. What I want to talk to you about this morning, though, is how we maximise the opportunity in the very short-term acute phase of when somebody still needs to be in a hospital, in inverted commas, as I'll explain in a while, and isn't able yet to access those community services because they need the medical and other interventions around them. At the moment, we don't make the most of that period of time, and it's such a crucial time. And we do find ourselves in a situation where we aren't providing that acute rehabilitation, that specialist inpatient rehabilitation sufficiently enough so that people are gaining function and potential back at that very early stage. So this is what our programme is all about. And yes, we're building a building, but this is really a transformational programme around rehabilitation, particularly focusing on the opportunity for AHPs to deliver in a different way. So let's start with some pretty stark stats, which probably won't be new to any of you, but may help in describing some of those cases that you may be struggling with. So just across Europe, nearly 400 million people have a health condition that could benefit from rehabilitation, but only 50% have access to rehab. And that's no different in the UK. What we also know is that we've got a severe shortfall of beds. So I work right in the middle of the country, in the East Midlands, and even according to our own BSPRM standards for rehabilitation, we're 173 inpatient specialist rehabilitation beds short. That's a huge capacity gap. If you multiply that across all the regions in the country, you can see where the problem starts. We don't have any very focused MSK inpatient in a specialist way rehabilitation. People tend to stay on trauma and orthopaedic wards for quite a significant period of time in some cases because we don't have those specialist services for those people. And if you look at the chart at the bottom in terms of rehab medicine consultants, and we know that consultant-led care makes a difference, then we're nearly at the bottom of the pile per 100,000 of the population. So whichever way you look at this, we've got some work to do. So where does the NRC come in? So this is a long-term programme of work. We've been working on this since 2010. It's a combined project with the Defence Military Rehab Centre, which has moved up from Headley Court into the Stamford Hall Rehabilitation Estate. And we are incredibly lucky to be housed within a 300-acre estate, most of which is also landscaped for rehabilitation purposes. So there's a huge opportunity here to really push the boundaries of what we can achieve with rehabilitation. So we're all about improving access to rehabilitation in those very early days. At the moment, most of our inpatient services are focused on neurological patients. We want to break that glass ceiling, and we want to break out of that and open rehabilitation up to that wider cohort of patients, really regardless of why the condition is sort of secondary to actually the rehabilitation need and the potential of that person. We do have the ability within the NRC to collaborate with the Defence Centre, and they have built a £300 million rehabilitation centre with fantastic kit in it, so we will have access to some of that, which is great, but more importantly, we'll work together and learn from their very different way of delivering rehabilitation than currently we do in the NHS, and they will also learn from us because we do have expertise that they don't have. The key for me in working with the military has been that vocational rehabilitation thread right from the start of their rehab journey, and the importance of that in terms of motivation and long-term outcomes has been a real learning point. We're also about coordinating those regional rehabilitation pathways. So for those of you in inpatient specialist rehabilitation at the moment, you will understand that The levels of rehabilitation are quite complicated, often don't work across a region. Patients get stuck in a particular level of rehabilitation, and we don't have the ability at the moment to move people through that pathway as would be of benefit. And we're also going to focus on technologies. The NRC is a very digitally enabled environment. It's a building that we spent a long time designing to promote independence in whatever way that person can gain it, both digitally and physically inside that space. So what's it all about? So the NRC is in 3 parts. We've taken best practice from other inpatient specialist centres around the world, and we've taken what we consider the best of the best and put it into our clinical model. But fundamentally, our clinical model has turned on its head the way that we think about rehabilitation in that acute inpatient setting at the moment. So very, very early in that patient's journey, we're putting rehabilitation right at the heart of it and putting the medical care around that rather than the other way around. And that's fundamentally the difference, so that we can pull people through 2 or 3 days post-op into a rehabilitation facility, but we do have 24/7 medical presence so that we can take people early on and we can really focus the attention on their rehabilitation needs. So rapid access is very, very important. We're creating a 24-hour approach to rehabilitation. So even if somebody is still very acute in their journey and they can tolerate only a little bit of rehabilitation, that whole 24-hour approach, everybody will be trained in the same way so that they're approaching the patient in the right way, they're using the same language, they're educating family and friends as much as we possibly can in those first few very traumatic days. Given that everybody has just experienced a life-changing illness or injury, we're anticipating everybody coming through the NRC and everybody coming through any inpatient rehabilitation facility to be in a state of anxiety and distress, and that's really important to recognise. And we've got quite a large psychology, mental health OT, social worker and CBT practitioner in that workforce, because unless we understand and address those mental health needs and anxieties, somebody's not going to flourish. So that's been a very important part of our workforce model. And then the golden thread through all of this is that return to life and work. How can we, in the NHS, do what the military do so brilliantly, which is keep somebody working throughout their rehabilitation journey? So if somebody can work whilst they're in the NRC, and let's be honest, most of us spend a lot of our days on Teams meetings and digitally enabled work environment, then we will do that. And I think that will make a huge difference to their levels of motivation and their long-term outcomes if we can keep them in their employment space. So that's really very important for us. What we know is that 6 months after somebody's gone through a major trauma injury, only 35% of people are back to some form of employment in this country, and across Europe that's between 50 and 60%. So again, there's a big delta here and a big gap to fill. In the military, it's between 80 and 85%, and that's for different reasons, but again, whichever way you look at this, there's some work that we've got to do. We also know that if people don't get into that inpatient specialist rehabilitation bed when they need it, and only 40% of people do at the moment in this country, and that's only for neurological injuries, don't forget, 60% of those people are readmitted within 6 months with some form of complication. So again, when you think about Jenny's talk and how we prevent readmissions, how we prevent admissions in the first place, how we maximise the opportunity when somebody comes out of a hospital bed or a rehab setting into community rehabilitation services, this part is really important. So that's the clinical model. The clinical model is also based on a regional model. So you may say, well, that's not national then, Miriam, is it? But actually, we're the hub of a hub and spoke model, which will then be translated across the whole country. We couldn't possibly build one building which would have the capacity to take everybody who needed rehabilitation, and that would be wrong, because we know that care closer to home is really important. So the clinical model is regional. We've got to prove that concept, so we're developing an NRC database, and that will go across community services. It will look at long-term outcomes, because as Jenny said, it's very difficult to get the information around that at the moment. There's very little out there in terms of what people are doing 5 and 10 years after a a major trauma or a head injury. It's very hard. So we will create that data set which can be used for our own clinical work, but also long-term research studies and some education as well. So the truly two national parts right from the outset at the NRC are the NRC Research Hub, and we've developed a strategy. We have appointed a research director who's a biomedical scientist from UCL, and we've also got two direct academic partners, Loughborough University and the University of Nottingham, who have access into the building to do training and teaching with their students, but also lead those research studies, but they are also open to everybody. We want to be a national but also an international player in this field. There is some fantastic work going on around the world, and the UK needs to be absolutely part of that. And then the third part is the NRC Academy. So we will be providing a national training academy for rehabilitation, and to that end, what we've done is mapped our roles against the levels of practice, but also looked at what is available across the whole country. And if you look at our website, you will see a catalogue, really, of what we consider to be rehab-related courses, the length and breadth of the country. We're then doing a gap analysis against that, and then we will develop our prospectus. So we don't open until next year, so this is a work in progress. But the idea is that we'll then have that comprehensive suite of undergraduate, postgraduate, summer schools, CPD courses, evenings and weekends. A lot of it will be online, so you can access it anywhere, and the opportunity to come and have a fellowship with us or an observership with us in the building, if that's something of interest. The really exciting thing about this is, I think, for a lot of us who've focused on rehabilitation in our careers, this is all quite piecemeal at the moment. So we'll have a course over here and a training session over here, and a lot of it will be in-house, but none of it actually comes together in that package in terms of if you say, right, I want to be a rehab specialist or a physio in a centre, and I want to be in 5 years' time 2 levels above what I am. What do I need to do to get there? And I'm really hoping that this will help guide that career pathway for everybody. So just some facts and figures again, which may well help with some of those cases to make. Rehab is cost effective. So we know that inpatient rehab costs around about £39,000 for an inpatient spell. When we get it right, and we do get this right, we then save over £500,000 for that one individual on ongoing health and social care costs. So if that's a stat you want to use, then please feel free. That came out of the NCASRI audit in 2019, which put the TARN and the UK ROC databases together, and that's a really powerful piece of information. What we modelled through the NRC is that socioeconomically, when we get people more back into life and work, less dependent on benefits, and we release those family members from the same, we will churn £3.3 billion back into the economy just from that one centre. That's massive. And think about extrapolating that across the rest of the country. So this stuff does really work. We know at the moment as well, you know, another argument, and it's topical, isn't it? The healthy workplace at the moment is not healthy. So we have more people out of work currently than we've ever had in this country due to ill health. Now, some of those people are on waiting lists, but not all. And some of those people could be rehabilitated back into a healthy workplace environment. So again, something to think about. So as I say, we have got the programme of work around those 3 areas, but let's talk about the building, because the building is also important. So why do we want a fancy new building? Well, actually, we want to raise the profile of rehabilitation. We want to provide somewhere to showcase what we do. We want to really raise the bar. And one of the ways of doing it, and it's not the only one, but one of the ways of doing it is having that focused hub and space where people can come and see what this is all about. So we will be the first operationally carbon net zero building for the NHS as well, which is also quite nice. It'd be a shame if we weren't able to achieve that, wouldn't we, with the brand new building. And we've been part of the new hospital programme, which has also set some targets around carbon net zero and modern methods of construction. But fundamentally, we've designed a space where the 3 functions of clinical training and research all happen in that same space. We haven't divided the building up into different areas. precisely for the fact that we want to get that research translated into clinical practice as quickly as we possibly can. We're not interested in that 10-year gap between a research paper being published and implementation into clinical practice anymore. This is not what this is about. So to bring all those people working in the same space, that will create that opportunity. We've also got, just talking to Dylan earlier, who's going to talk next, we've got innovation space in the building. So we want to welcome industries in to work with a patient around a particular issue to potentially develop a new product and then spin that out and benefit more patients. So we've dedicated space within the building for that. And again, from an NHS perspective, that's quite novel and new. So who will be taking? When we started this programme of work, as I said previously, we wanted to open the opportunity to access rehabilitation to as wide a cohort as possible. And we really wanted to say, this is open to everybody with a rehab need and potential, regardless of why. As soon as you start to talk to commissioners, you do have to narrow that down a bit and put some numbers and phrases around it. But broadly, I think this pretty much covers everybody, don't you? And we're particularly interested, and we've supported somebody doing a PhD actually, who's just concluding this side of Christmas, around how do we define deconditioning? How do we define that deconditioned person in a way that we can then make the appropriate referral for that person? And it's something that's been a really tricky PhD to do, actually. It's opened up a lot of debate, but really important to get right because we do see a lot of that in the acute setting at the moment. So, technology, the building will be digitally enabled, partly to create that carbon net zero, but also let's use all the technology that we all use in our day-to-day lives to enable that person to plan their rehab day as much as they possibly can, to take that out, those digitally enabling technologies, out with them, out into the back at home and back into the community setting. We've got 2 rehabilitation flats in the building where people can bring family and friends to stay for a week or 2 before they leave, where we're hands off, but we're around if we need help. And I think that will be particularly useful time to get used to using new technologies, actually. So we're really trying to pioneer the research around technology as well. So happy to take questions. I don't know if we've got time, but the QR code is that we are starting to recruit at the moment, if anybody's interested. Shameless, I know. So we will be opening next summer, and we're advertising some Band 7 physio and OT roles at the moment. So if anybody's interested, then please get in touch, or just get in touch with me on the email below. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Miriam. I, probably like most people in the audience, was absolutely blown away by that.